Story 1. I have worked in human resources for a couple of years now, mostly for large firms managing facilities within properties. One of the strangest cases was brought about because a client asked us to review closed-circuit television footage. He had driven past the office late at night and noticed the motion sensor lights inside going on and off, and he was concerned that there had been a break-in. It turned out our night security officer, whose primary role is to monitor cameras from the control room, was skipping up and down the corridors because he felt too full of energy and had to get it out of his system somehow. Watching the footage of him skipping and occasionally doing star jumps through vacant corridors for 20 minutes at 1 a.m. really made my day. Story 2. Got a call from our office in India that staff who supported the night shift were running a brothel from the office. They didn't know they couldn't do that. Still fired. They tried to appeal the decision. It did not work. Story 3. Worked for a large trucking company. Every employee would receive a present on their birthday in the mail, and their names would be displayed on the video board. This week's birthdays are: a guy called to ask if his name could not be on the board. The reason: his twin brother murdered their parents, and he did not want to be reminded of his birthday. Story 4. I no longer work in human resources or at this company, but it's my favorite story from my time there. Our benefits team made the decision to eliminate reserved parking as many employees were frustrated when they walked past dozens of empty spots in the reserved lots every day. This new policy applied to all of the company's locations. Of course, the benefits manager received hundreds of complaints in the first few days from people insisting they needed an exception for their own personal spot. The best reason by far was from one person who needed a spot close to the door because they were terrified of bobcats. No other context. We didn't have bobcats near the corporate office, so at first we thought they meant construction equipment. It turns out there actually were sightings of bobcats, like the animal, near this person's location. Last I heard, they were told to arrive earlier to get a closer spot and didn't get an exception. Story 5. One of the dumbest things: an employee who worked night audit at a hotel parked his car at the entrance and would occasionally go out there to drink a bottle of vodka in full view of the cameras. He didn't even sit in his car to drink, just grabbed the bottle out of the car each time and drank in the open. Seriously, he could have put it in a water bottle and drank at the desk and would not have been caught as soon as he was, if at all. Story 6. I am not in human resources, but my sister-in-law used to work in that field for a large Canadian technology firm. An executive at the company got very drunk at a conference in Las Vegas, and the company received a call from the hotel saying they would have to pay for outside contractors. He had smeared his feces all over the walls of his hotel room, and the hotel cleaning staff refused to deal with it. Story 7. My dad works in human resources. He just told me about a day when they had to lay off about half of the company. It was crazy, and there were a whole lot of moving parts that day. Unfortunately, in all the craziness, no one remembered to tell this one new hire that, sadly, the position he was hired for was no longer affordable. So he came into the office only to see everyone clearing out their desks and leaving. And then he got laid off an hour into his first day. He said the guy understood, but it was the most horrible he ever felt for someone in his life. Story 8. Not human resources, but have been on teams to interview and have input on possible hires. One standard question: what would you do if you were having problems with a coworker? Answers can include: I would try and work it out, or I would take it to a manager, etc. His answer: I'd take him out back and beat the crap out of him. He was surprised when he didn't get the job. Story 9. Obscuring a few details here, you'll understand why in a second. There was a mid-level supervisor at a state agency I never got along with. The guy was nasty, argumentative, a real piece of work, but still had a decent number of people loyal to him. I come in one day and he's not there, and everyone was distraught. It turns out law enforcement had come after the guy and caught him red-handed trafficking child pornography. Rather than arrest him immediately, they gave him the option to return home, settle his affairs, and maybe call his lawyer. He took the opportunity to hang himself in his own garage instead. The next couple of weeks was just damage control among the staff when the details came out. It was a horrible situation all around. Story 10. Call center employee calls human resources to complain about their supervisor. He's abusive. He won't even let me leave my desk. Supervisor calls human resources to complain about employee. Can you please tell her that she's allowed to leave her desk? Oh my God. She's using the trash can inappropriately. It may sound humorous, but there were significant mental issues at the heart of this. Story 11. I had to see a video of a guy who defecated on himself during work while running to the restroom because his manager would not let him leave a meeting early. The guy had inflammatory bowel disease, and the manager knew this, so the video shows him running down the hall, and literally a few feet from the restrooms, he starts defecating on himself and you see it coming down his pant leg. He looked to be in pain because he kind of collapsed and then got back up. People were baffled when they saw this live, and the manager was fired, so definitely the weirdest incident I've ever seen. Literally. Story 12. I once had a temporary job in human resources. I was scanning lots of old personnel files, and the one perk of the job was reading old complaints against people. The best one I came across was a mediation caused by one member of staff accusing another of witchcraft. Story 13. I've shared this story before, but an employee from a different country and culture never showered. He said that where he comes from, they shower about once a month. His co-workers complained of the smell, which was extremely offensive. His supervisor eventually sent him home and told him he couldn't come back until he showered. It was a union business, and the employee filed a grievance with the union representative. They came into my office, which has a camera because it was where we had all major disciplinary meetings. The moment they walked into my office, I almost gagged from the smell. It was suffocating. I had 2 chairs in front of my desk and I asked them to take a seat while I went and pulled his file. When I left, I pulled the door closed behind me. I went to my boss's office, told him the situation, and asked him to pull up the camera in my office. It was hilarious. The union representative was holding his shirt over his nose and telling the employee, "You're killing me. You've got to take a shower." After letting them marinate in the stench for about 10 minutes, I went back in and the union representative retracted his grievance and agreed to send the employee home. Story 14. I got a call from a woman I'd never spoken to, asking when she could start. She had received a job offer after interviewing with a manager for a customer service position. She told me, but no one ever contacted her about a start date or pre-employment processes like a background check, and it had been a month. After a lengthy investigation, it came out that this manager had fabricated a job opening and offered it to this woman in an attempt to impress her. She quit her job, but, it should be noted, did not respond to the manager's romantic overtures, with the expectation of joining my company. She got a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement and the guy who hired her got fired. There was also a guy who faked his son's death for some extra paid time off. Story 15. The maintenance guy had been living above the ceiling of the building. He had built a small living area with electricity and a small fridge and everything. For years. Story 16. I used to work at a staffing agency that placed people in manufacturing positions. Everyone had to be drug tested at the office as part of the orientation. If the test results came back as inconclusive, we would send the potential hire to a medical lab. They would take another drug test, and the lab could determine if the person was on a prescription or using illegal drugs and, therefore, not eligible for hire. One guy failed his drug test at the lab. He came back to the office claiming that it wasn't his fault. He explained that he was riding in a car with his head out of the window. Then, when the car passed under a bridge, someone threw a bunch of cocaine off the bridge. It hit him in the face, and he accidentally inhaled it. Story 17. I work for a software development consulting company where we go onto client sites and help them develop custom software. One person, super nice with about 7 years of experience, goes on to their first client site with the company and all is good for about 3 weeks until the following happens in increased escalation every couple of days. 1. I don't think the manager likes me. The manager is bad-mouthing me to others. The manager isn't including me in meetings, so I don't know they're happening and miss them. The manager is taking away my completed tasks from the board, so I don't look like I am being productive. The manager is logging onto my computer remotely and reading my personal emails. The manager is changing my time cards, which the manager has absolutely no access to. Essentially, it turned out that the person had mental health challenges and thought the manager was sabotaging their every move on the client site. The paranoia just kept going. Unfortunately, they got kind of belligerent at the end. I hope they got the help they needed, but it was super uncomfortable. How do you tell someone that their perception isn't reality? Story 18. The family of the man who passed away came to speak to us, as it was in a factory environment, to get pension documents and so on. We sent them away with a to-do list. 1 hour later, reception informed us that Mr. X's family was here. Strange, since the documents take a few days to get. Nope, it was a new family. Yes, the man had two different families, who were about to have an unexpected surprise. Story 19. I was a recruiter, and you would be shocked to see what some people actually have as their personal email. Most people have come around to using just their name, but then every once in a while you have to verify that brownglitter69 is in fact how they would like to be contacted. Story 20. An information technology guy who worked the overnight shift because he was doing support for our Asia and Europe regions got written up for improper use of company systems. He had dozens, if not hundreds, of Google image searches related to foot fetish content like insert celebrity here feet, along with other random searches like cute toes. Like, dude, you're in information technology. You know this stuff is tracked and that your boss could easily monitor it. Story 21. We had this new hire. I heard about him through the grapevine. He was fired from his last job for inappropriate behavior in the break room. Somehow, he was hired by my company, and God knows why, because I haven't heard a single good thing about him from anyone ever. His job was to sweep the floors of our factory. That's not backbreaking work. It's pretty much endless, but you can take it slow and have time to chat with other employees and roam around. We have retired and disabled people who do that job, and they are fine with it. In the first 3 weeks he was there, I got so many write-ups, extended break time, job not done after multiple requests, smoking on the job and not in a designated area, constantly on his phone, and complaints, racist/sexist jokes, body odor, occupational safety and health administration violations, not wearing personal protective equipment. About him, it was hard to keep track. So I did what I always do, fast-tracked his termination and sent it to the head of human resources. I heard nothing about it until a few weeks later when I started receiving complaints about him again. I went to see the head of human resources, asking if those were just delayed paperwork because in my mind he was fired weeks ago. Turns out he was never fired. He was the nephew of the head of human resources. She transferred him to another department. She took every complaint about him directly, except one that got to me. He was now a security guard, but not like you see at a music festival. He was a button operator. He operated the button to let the people in the factory and kept track of everybody that entered or left the site. He was under training with the sweetest old lady there is. Everybody, even the chief executive officer, calls her grandma because she is just so sweet. I encountered grandma on break one day, and she looked disturbed. It was not her usual break time, so I asked her what she was doing in the break room alone so early. She told me, "It's the new hire's personal time." I asked her what she meant. She told me, "Well, I made lots of complaints about it. Haven't you read them?" I said, "No, none of them got to me." She looked disturbed and almost like crying. She then told me, since he was transferred to her, he noticed there was a computer at his post to log ins and outs. Bear in mind, this computer does not connect to the internet. Well, the second day, while grandma was gone to the bathroom, he started inappropriate behavior with materials he brought from home on a flash drive. She caught him and he acted like it was no big deal. In the weeks that followed, he continued to behave inappropriately on the job to the point where he would not even stop when grandma caught him. He told her, "I don't care if you watch, but if you don't want to see it, just leave." So she made a schedule where every 2 hours, she would leave for 15 minutes for him to do his business. I was upset and went straight to the head of human resources with it. I told her that grandma had gotten a lawyer and was threatening to sue the company. I knew it was false, but that's the only thing that could make things move. The matter was transferred to the legal department, and he was fired that very morning. The head of human resources still argued that without proof, we could not fire him. The meeting ended with her storming out and saying, "Fine, do whatever you want." She quit a few months after that. I'm very glad you all enjoyed that. I have so many more memories about this place of work. Not all about human resources, but this place of work is basically like the TV show Dallas. Story 22. One of my relatives worked in tech support for a really high-profile company in Silicon Valley during the height of the dot-com boom. Some guy who desperately wanted to work there was emailing his resume to human resources 1,000 times every day. Several times a day, the number of emails would get too overwhelming. So the people in human resources would just select all the emails in the inbox and delete all of them, whether the emails were from the applicant or not. My relative had to show them how to filter emails from the applicant.